Hi, my name is Emily, and I've never told anyone this story before. Honestly, I wasn't sure I ever would. But I've realized that some things in life are so unbelievable, so shocking, that keeping them to yourself feels impossible. This is the story of how my own parents betrayed me in a way I could never have imagined, and how I fought back for my daughter. I live in a small town in the United States. Life here is quiet, predictable, and sometimes monotonous, but it's perfect for raising my daughter, Lily. Lily is 9 years old, and she is one of the most talented kids I've ever met. Music is her world. She started playing the cello when she was just 5, and it quickly became her passion, her escape, her way of expressing herself. She practices every day, sometimes for hours, completely lost in the music. Watching her play is like watching magic happen right in front of your eyes. Her cello isn't just an instrument, it's a part of our family's history. It belonged to my grandmother, who passed away when I was a teenager. She left it to me with the hope that one day it would find its way into Lily's hands. I remember the day I gave it to Lily. She wrapped her small arms around it, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I promise I'll take care of it." That promise meant the world to me. It wasn't just a cello. It was love, memory, and legacy, all wrapped into one beautiful wooden instrument. My parents, Richard and Diane, have always been complicated people. On the surface, they are polite, charming, and generous, or at least that's the face they show the world. But beneath that veneer is control, manipulation, and greed. Growing up, I learned quickly that they always expected something in return, and disappointment or disobedience was never tolerated. As an adult, I tried to keep my distance. I loved them because they are my parents, but I always knew they had their limits. And those limits didn't include morality or respect for me or my family. Everything seemed fine on the day it happened. Lily was practicing in her bedroom, completely absorbed in her music. I had just brewed a cup of coffee and was standing in the kitchen, enjoying a quiet moment to myself. Life felt normal. I could hear the soft, sweet notes drifting from her room, and for a second, I felt that perfect calm every parent secretly cherishes. And then I went to check on her, and it was gone. At first, I thought maybe she had moved it somewhere else, her music stand, the living room, but I quickly realized the cello was nowhere. Panic began to rise in my chest. I called out for Lily, and she came running, confused and nervous. I asked her if she had seen it, and she shook her head, her small face crumpled in worry. My stomach sank. That's when I realized it wasn't just missing. Someone had taken it. The only people in the house that day besides us were my parents. I had let them in for a short visit, thinking nothing of it. They had come over to chat, maybe to help me organize a few things. I never imagined that in those few hours, my parents would commit the single most shocking betrayal of my life. My parents, my own flesh and blood, had stolen Lily's cello. I remember the sick feeling in my stomach, the disbelief, the anger bubbling up so fast I could barely breathe. This wasn't just theft. This was betrayal on a level I didn't think was possible. My daughter's face, the way she looked at me, trusting, innocent, unaware of the danger her treasured cello was in, haunts me to this day. At that moment, I knew life as we knew it had changed. I knew I couldn't sit back and do nothing. Something had to be done. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I promised myself one thing. Whoever thought they could take from my daughter and get away with it was about to learn a very hard lesson. After discovering the cello was gone, I felt a strange mix of disbelief and dread. I couldn't breathe properly, my chest felt tight, and my hands were trembling. Lily looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes, completely unaware that her world was about to change. She asked softly, "Mommy, where's my cello?" I froze. How could I explain that it wasn't just missing, that it had been taken, not by a stranger, but by the people I had trusted the most? The people who were supposed to love and protect me, and my daughter above all else. I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay, that it would come back, but even as I opened my mouth, I realized I didn't know if that was true. I called my parents immediately. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the phone tightly. "Mom, Dad, where's Lily's cello?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. There was a pause, and then Diane spoke, sweet and calm as ever. "Emily, it's just a cello. We just wanted to make sure it was safe." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter's prized possession, the instrument she loved more than anything, was missing, and my mother was acting like it was no big deal. "Safe? Mom, it's not safe, it's gone. Where did you put it?" I demanded. "Oh, Emily, don't worry. It's fine. You know how valuable it is. We just thought we'd make sure it's protected," Diane said, her voice almost dripping with false innocence. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand that she return it immediately. But something in me told me to stay calm. I couldn't let them see my panic, not yet. My heart was pounding, and I felt bile rising in my throat. But I needed answers. 3 days later, the truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. The cello had been sold, not given away, not safely stored, sold, and for a staggering $87,000. I couldn't believe it. I kept staring at the email confirmation, rereading it over and over, hoping that it was some kind of mistake. But no. There it was in black and white, a sale confirmed through a private auction. The cello, Lily's cello, the one with her tiny fingerprints pressed into the varnish, was gone forever, and my parents had taken the money for themselves. I felt rage and sorrow collide inside me. My parents had crossed every line I thought existed. They had chosen greed over love. They had stolen not only something valuable, but something irreplaceable, something that carried the memories of my grandmother and the dreams of my daughter. I remember sitting on the floor with Lily curled against me, tears streaming down both our faces. She was too young to fully understand, but she knew something was wrong. "Mommy, why would they do that?" she whispered. Her small hands gripped my shirt as if trying to anchor herself to me. My heart broke into pieces. I didn't have a simple answer. I only knew this. Whoever had done this, whoever had taken what was ours, would not walk away unpunished. In the days that followed, I confronted my parents again, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "How could you sell her cello? She loves it. That was hers," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Richard," my father shrugged. "It's just money, Emily. Don't take it so seriously. She'll get another cello one day." Diane smiled faintly, as if proud of herself. "Honestly, Emily, you worry too much. It's just an object. She'll live." I could feel my blood boil. My own parents had reduced my daughter's dreams, her memories, and her joy to a mere object, a commodity to be sold for profit. The betrayal cut so deeply, I felt like I was drowning in it. But beneath the heartbreak, beneath the shock and tears, a spark of determination ignited inside me. I would not let this go. I couldn't. I had to fight, not just for the cello, but for Lily, for her happiness, her trust, her future. And I swore to myself that they would pay for what they did. That night, as Lily slept with her arms wrapped around her pillow, I sat awake, my mind racing with plans. How could I turn this around? How could I make them face the consequences of their greed? I didn't yet know the answer, but one thing was certain: my parents had made a huge mistake. They had underestimated me, and I was about to show them just how wrong they were. After the shocking revelation that my parents had sold Lily's cello for $87,000, our lives changed overnight. The house felt colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were mourning the loss. Lily barely spoke for days, and every time I glanced at her, my heart ached. That cello wasn't just an instrument, it was a part of her, a symbol of her passion, her memories, and our family's legacy. My parents had destroyed it without a second thought. I reached out to a few close friends, hoping someone could help me process what had happened. They were horrified. "Emily, this isn't just theft," one friend said. "This is emotional abuse. They took something precious from your daughter and sold it for money. That's unforgivable." I agreed. Every night, I replayed the moment in my head when Lily asked me where her cello was, the confusion and trust in her eyes. I couldn't erase it. I couldn't forgive it. And I couldn't let it go. When I confronted my parents again, I tried to stay calm, but the anger simmered just beneath the surface. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "It was hers. You had no right." Richard leaned back in his chair, pretending to be amused. "Emily, it's just a cello. You're making such a big deal over nothing." Diane gave me that same fake, saccharine smile she always used when she wanted to dismiss me. "Honestly, Emily, you worry too much. It's just an object. She'll get another cello someday." I felt my blood boil. Another cello. Do you have any idea what that cello meant to her? To me, you didn't just sell an instrument, you sold her childhood, her memories, her dreams. They didn't even flinch. They were smug, confident that their charm and years of manipulation could deflect my anger. But I saw through it. I realized something critical. My parents had no intention of acknowledging what they had done. They had crossed a line, and now it was my job to make sure they faced the consequences. I spent the next few days in a blur of emotion. Anger, grief, and disbelief collided inside me. Every time I looked at Lily's empty practice space, I felt like I was staring at a wound that wouldn't heal. I couldn't let her see me crumble, so I forced myself to stay strong. But inside, a plan began to form. I had always been a planner, careful and methodical. And now, for the first time in years, I had a clear target. My parents thought they had outsmarted me, that they could take what they wanted without repercussion. They were wrong. I wasn't going to act impulsively. I wasn't going to scream or fight, at least not yet. I was going to gather evidence, build my case, and hit them where it would hurt most: their pride, their reputation, and their money. I began documenting everything: emails, text messages, auction receipts, and even conversations where my parents bragged about the sale. I started discreetly contacting the auction house, gathering as much information as I could without alerting them. Every detail, every paper trail, would become a weapon in the battle I was about to wage. Meanwhile, Lily watched quietly, confused and sad. I hugged her tighter than ever, promising her that we would get justice, that we would make things right. She didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but I saw the spark in her eyes, the same spark that had driven her to practice hours on end, pouring her heart into music. I promised myself I wouldn't let that spark die. By the end of the week, my anger had crystallized into focus. I wasn't going to let my parents get away with this. They had taken from my daughter what could never be replaced. Now, it was my turn to take action, and I knew exactly how I would do it. The storm was coming, and I was ready. Once the shock settled, something inside me changed. The anger didn't fade, but it sharpened. I stopped crying. I stopped replaying arguments in my head. Instead, I started thinking clearly. Coldly. If my parents believed they could steal from my daughter and walk away untouched, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I knew one thing for certain: reacting emotionally would only give them power. That's what they expected: tears, yelling, maybe even forgiveness. I wasn't going to give them that. I needed leverage. Late at night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, combing through emails, messages, and old documents. I searched for anything related to the cello: insurance papers, appraisal notes, photos from when my grandmother first gave it to me. Every detail mattered now. That cello had a history, and that history was my strongest weapon. I contacted the auction house anonymously, pretending to be a concerned third party. I asked questions carefully: how the cello had been acquired, whether proper ownership documents were verified, whether consent from the legal owner had been provided. Their responses were polite, professional, and revealing. The more I learned, the clearer it became. My parents had cut corners. They hadn't provided full proof of ownership. They had relied on confidence and charm to push the sale through quickly. That was my opening. Next, I spoke to a lawyer. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't threaten them. I simply asked questions, and with every answer, my resolve grew stronger. Selling a minor's property without parental consent? Illegal. Profiting from stolen property? Worse. Misrepresenting ownership during a high-value auction? Potentially devastating for them. For the first time since the cello disappeared, I felt something close to relief. But I wasn't finished. I started paying attention to my parents more closely: the way they talked, the way they bragged. They couldn't help themselves. Diane casually mentioned the windfall to a family friend. Richard joked about finally getting what that old instrument was worth. I documented everything: dates, times, exact words. They were digging their own graves, and they didn't even realize it. Meanwhile, Lily noticed the change in me. One night, she sat beside me and asked quietly, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I pulled her into my arms and whispered, "Yes, I promise you, this isn't over." That promise fueled me. I decided that when the time came, I wouldn't just take back what they stole. I would expose who they really were. The people who smiled at church, who bragged about family values, who pretended to be loving grandparents. I would strip away the mask and let the truth speak for itself. I began drafting formal letters, legal notices. Calm, professional, impossible to ignore. I didn't send them yet, not until I had everything lined up perfectly. My parents thought silence meant surrender. They thought my lack of calls meant I'd given up. Deanne even left a voicemail, her tone smug and satisfied. "Emily, I hope you've calmed down. This really doesn't need to be a big thing." She was right about one thing. It was going to be a big thing. Just not in the way she expected. Because while they were spending that $87,000 enjoying dinners and vacations, I was building something far more powerful than anger. I was building a case. And once I pulled the trigger, there would be no undoing it. They took my daughter's cello. Now I was about to take something from them that money couldn't buy back: their reputation, their security, and their control. And the best part? They still had no idea what was coming. By the time I was ready to act, weeks had passed. Weeks of silence. Weeks of planning. Weeks of my parents growing more comfortable, more careless. That was exactly what I needed. I stopped bringing up the cello entirely. No angry calls. No emotional messages. When Diane texted me photos from a weekend getaway, paid for with money she pretended didn't exist, I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. When Richard called to talk about family unity, I kept my voice neutral and polite. I could almost hear their relief through the phone. They thought I had folded. To seal the illusion, I invited them to dinner. Nothing fancy, just a quiet restaurant we'd been to dozens of times before. Familiar, safe. I even let Diane choose the place. When she agreed, I could tell she felt victorious, as if this dinner was proof that she had once again won. That night I dressed calmly, deliberately. No dramatic makeup, no visible anger. Lily stayed with a friend, unaware of what was unfolding. This wasn't a night for tears. This was a night for truth. When my parents arrived, they were relaxed, laughing, joking, ordering wine. Diane squeezed my hand and said, "I'm so glad you're over all that stress, Emily." I smiled. "Oh, I am," I said, and for the first time it wasn't a lie. Halfway through dinner, I casually steered the conversation. "I spoke to someone recently who works with high-end musical instruments," I said lightly. "You'd be surprised how serious the laws are around ownership." Richard barely looked up from his plate. "People exaggerate, it's all paperwork." I nodded. That's what I thought too. Diane's smile faltered just a little. I took a sip of water and continued, calm as ever. "Did you know selling property belonging to a minor without legal consent can void a sale entirely?" Silence. Richard stiffened. Diane's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me. "Why are you bringing this up now?" she asked, her voice still sweet, but strained. "No reason," I said, "just learning a lot lately." That was when I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward them. On the screen were copies of auction records, appraisal documents, emails from the auction house, time-stamped, organized, undeniable. Diane's face drained of color. "You went behind our backs," she whispered. I leaned forward slightly. "You went behind my daughter's." The air felt thick, heavy with realization. Richard tried to laugh it off. "Emily, don't be dramatic. This can be worked out." "Oh, it already is," I said quietly. That's when I told them about the lawyer, about the pending inquiry, about the auction house being notified that ownership had been misrepresented. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated facts. Fact by fact, their confidence collapsed. Diane reached for my hand. "We're family," she said urgently. "We can fix this privately." I pulled my hand back. "You had that chance," I replied. "You chose money." The check arrived. I paid it without hesitation and stood up. As I walked away, I heard Diane crying softly. Richard said nothing. For once, there was nothing he could say. But the real trap hadn't even sprung yet. The next morning, the auction house froze the remaining funds. An official investigation began. Family friends started asking questions, quietly at first, then more openly. Diane stopped posting online. Richard stopped answering calls. They weren't in control anymore. And I was just getting started. Because what they didn't realize, what they still didn't see, was that this wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. And in the next phase, they were going to feel exactly what it was like to lose something they thought they owned. The moment the investigation became official, the power shifted completely. I felt it in the silence. No more smug messages. No more casual phone calls pretending nothing had happened. My parents had gone quiet, and that silence told me everything. The auction house contacted me directly within days. Their tone had changed from polite curiosity to professional concern. They asked for documentation proving my grandmother's ownership, Lily's inheritance, and my parental authority. I sent everything. Photos, notarized papers, even a handwritten note my grandmother had left years ago about keeping the cello in the family. Once they had that, things moved fast. The remaining funds from the sale were frozen immediately. Lawyers got involved. The buyer demanded answers. Suddenly, my parents weren't charming retirees anymore, they were liabilities. I was informed that misrepresentation during the sale could expose them to serious legal consequences. That was when Diane called me. Her voice was nothing like before. Gone was the sweetness, the superiority. She sounded panicked. "Emily, please," she said, barely holding it together. "This has gone too far." I listened quietly. "Your father could lose everything," she continued. "Our savings, our reputation, people are talking." People were talking. Word spreads fast in small circles, especially when money and betrayal are involved. Friends who once admired my parents began distancing themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Church acquaintances avoided eye contact. The image they had worked so hard to maintain was cracking. And they knew exactly why. Richard tried next. He came to my house unannounced, standing on my porch like a stranger. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller somehow, older. "We never meant to hurt Lily," he said quietly. I looked him straight in the eye. "You sold her future for cash." He didn't deny it. The legal outcome came a week later. The auction house formally acknowledged the improper sale. While the cello itself couldn't be recovered, the buyer refused to return it. The funds were ruled improperly obtained. A significant portion was ordered returned and placed into a trust for Lily's education and musical future. When I saw the paperwork, I cried, not because of the money, but because for the first time since this nightmare began, someone had listened. Someone had said this was wrong. That night, I sat with Lily and explained everything in simple terms. I told her that what was taken from her mattered, and that the world had seen that too. "So they didn't win?" she asked. I smiled and shook my head. "No, sweetheart, they didn't." She hugged me tightly, her arms wrapping around my waist. "Thank you for protecting me." That moment made every sleepless night worth it. As for my parents, the consequences didn't end there. Legal fees drained what remained of the money they'd bragged about. Their social circle shrank. The authority they once wielded over me vanished completely. They tried to apologize again. This time, it sounded real, but apologies don't erase choices. And some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. I didn't yell, I didn't gloat, I simply stepped back. Because justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs truth. And as I watched my parents struggle with the aftermath of their own greed, I felt something unexpected. Not joy, not revenge, but peace. I had done what I needed to do. I had stood up for my daughter. I had proven that even against the people who raised you, you are allowed to say no more. But the story wasn't over yet. Because once the dust settled, I had to decide something far harder than revenge. What comes after justice? And whether forgiveness had any place in what they'd done. After the dust settled, the house felt quieter than ever. The tension that had hung over us for weeks, the anger, the fear, the constant worry had eased, but the wounds remained. Lily was slowly returning to her old self, but there were moments when I would see her pause mid-practice, eyes glistening with the memory of her lost cello. And I would feel a familiar ache in my chest. That instrument wasn't just wood and strings, it was a piece of our lives, our memories, and it was gone. For days, I sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed, sipping tea and replaying the events in my head. I asked myself the same questions over and over. How could my own parents do this? How could they betray me and my daughter so completely? And most importantly, what had I learned from it all? I realized first that people, sometimes even family, can disappoint in ways you never imagine. My parents had violated my trust, stolen from my daughter, and tried to manipulate us both. But here's the thing, their actions, awful as they were, also revealed something crucial. They showed me that I am stronger than I thought, that when your child's happiness is on the line, there's no limit to what you will do to protect them. I also understood the power of patience and strategy. I didn't act impulsively. I didn't yell or throw tantrums. Instead, I stayed calm, I gathered evidence, I planned carefully. That is how I turned the situation around. That is how I ensured justice was served, not only legally but emotionally. Watching my parents face the consequences of their actions without me ever raising my voice felt like the sweetest vindication. But reflection isn't just about justice, it's about growth. I thought a lot about forgiveness. Could I forgive them? Could I ever trust them again? I didn't have the answers yet. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, not a demand. And maybe someday I could find it in my heart, but for now, protecting Lily and reclaiming our peace came first. Through all this, Lily taught me one of the most important lessons of all. Despite losing her cello, she found resilience. She continued to play, pouring her grief and determination into her music. One evening, she turned to me with a small, proud smile. "Mom, I think I'm ready to start learning a new piece," she said. Her eyes shone, and in that moment, I realized that what was taken from her couldn't destroy her spirit. And in that, I found my own healing. The betrayal had been crushing, yes, but it had also ignited a fire. A fire to protect, to act, to stand up for what mattered. I had been tested in ways I never imagined, and I had passed. I began to rebuild our lives slowly. Small victories, like laughter returning to our home, meals without tension, and music filling our rooms again, became milestones. I reconnected with old friends who had supported us through the ordeal, and we started planning little outings, moments of joy that reminded Lily and me that life moves forward, even after heartbreak. I also took steps to ensure nothing like this could happen again. I began documenting all of Lily's instruments, creating records of ownership and appraisal, and keeping backup copies of everything important. It wasn't just about money, it was about safeguarding memories, history, and trust. Most importantly, I reflected on what it meant to be a parent. This ordeal reminded me that protecting a child isn't just about food, shelter, or education. It's about standing up against injustice, even when it comes from people who are supposed to love you. It's about teaching them that courage and integrity matter more than anything else. By the time Part 7 closed, I had found some peace, but not complacency. The cello was gone, my parents' betrayal had left scars, but we were stronger. Lily's music returned, louder and more beautiful than ever. And I knew, without a doubt, that no one could take away our resilience, our love, or our determination to protect what mattered most. The weeks after the legal resolution felt almost surreal. My parents, once so confident, had vanished into their own shame, leaving a quiet that was both strange and comforting. The house, once heavy with tension, finally began to feel like home again. Lily's laughter returned slowly, almost cautiously at first, but it came back. And with it, a sense of normalcy I had feared lost forever. We didn't get Lily's cello back. The buyer refused, and legally, that was the end of it. But the money was returned to her in a trust. It wasn't just a consolation prize, it was a symbol of justice. More than that, it was a promise to Lily that no one could take what truly mattered without facing consequences. That sense of safety, of protection, was priceless. I remember the first night we sat together in her music room again. The walls were lined with her instruments, her sheets of music scattered across the floor. She picked up a new cello, a smaller one for her age, but beautifully crafted, and ran her hands over the strings. She looked up at me with that familiar, determined gaze and said, "Mom, I think I'm ready." I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and pride. That small gesture, the way she chose to continue despite everything, showed me that resilience is taught as much through example as through words. I had fought for her, yes, but in return, she taught me how to heal, how to move forward, and how to find strength in adversity. We rebuilt our lives slowly. I enrolled Lily in more music programs, encouraged her to perform in local recitals, and even started documenting her progress, photographs, videos, and notes. Each moment became a record not only of her talent, but of our perseverance. I wanted her to know that no one could ever erase her achievements or her joy, even if they tried to take it away. Our relationship with my parents changed permanently. I no longer invited them into our lives the way I once had. Contact was minimal, mostly formal, necessary interactions, but the warmth and trust that had once existed were gone. That was the hardest part, accepting that family isn't always safe, and sometimes protection comes at the cost of distance. Yet, life moved on. With Lily thriving and our home filled with music and laughter again, I began to focus on myself too. I started a small business from home, something creative that allowed me to reclaim my independence and rebuild the life I had put on hold for my parents' interference. Slowly, I realized that standing up for yourself, even against those closest to you, can become a source of empowerment, not just anger. Most importantly, we learned to treasure what truly matters: love, trust, and integrity. The cello may have been gone, but the lessons it carried, the importance of protecting what you love, the value of resilience, and the power of action, remained. Lily's music became a symbol not of loss, but of triumph. One evening, I watched her play in the backyard, sunlight glinting off the strings. She was fully absorbed, her face serene, lost in the melody she had created. I stood at the doorway, sipping a cup of tea, and realized something profound. No matter what obstacles came our way, no one could steal our joy or our strength. That music, that passion, and our bond were ours, and ours alone. We had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and deceit. We had faced greed and manipulation from the people we once trusted the most, and we had come out stronger. The cello may have been gone, but what it had taught us about courage, resilience, and the power of a mother's love would stay with us forever. And as Lily finished her piece and looked at me with that bright, unwavering smile, I knew that this was the real victory. Not the money returned, not the legal win, but the knowledge that we could endure, heal, and flourish no matter what the world, or even our own family, threw our way. We had a new normal now, one built not on fear or betrayal, but on trust, love, and the unwavering belief that together, we could survive anything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.